It's kind of weird to be sitting off to the side like this, so if you want to move this way or not, because, well, we'll do whatever. I'm Scott Wimberg. I'm the Vice President for Research and Creative Scholarship and Dean of the Graduate School at the University of Montana. And it may seem strange that I'm somehow involved with a group of entrepreneurs, but I've been here about 4 years, and prior to coming here, I was the VP for Research and Economic Development at the University of New Orleans. And there it was more obvious that we had to connect our research to economic development in the community. And so I've done some of that since coming here with a lot of help from Joe Fungi and others that are within my organization. And so we now have a variety of things that we do for business development and entrepreneurship within research at the university. And so we have like the Small Business Development Center, and the Procurement Technical Assistance Center, and the World Trade Center, and the Blackstone Launchpad Program, and so on. A lot, and Montech is the business incubator. We started a new accelerator. And so what our hope is that we can take people all the way from an idea all the way through a company formation and acquiring venture capital. So we want to provide a resource to allow people, entrepreneurs, to actually create viable companies within this region. And so I'm really just the moderator for all this. I do have some interesting stories because I've started a couple of companies, one of which did okay and one of which failed. So I can tell you both stories if we had a really dull part of the conversation. But primarily what we want to do is have these people sort of, and I'll introduce each one of them, talk to us about thinking big. The theme for this is to, when you start your company or if you already have a company, don't think about what you're going to do here within Missoula or even within the state. We're going to try to help you think about what you can do outside of the state or even internationally. And my story would be about how I'd be a multi-millionaire right now and I'd be standing in front of you if I'd made one small change when I started one of my companies at the very beginning, because I didn't think internationally. It's a very interesting story, probably more interesting than anything they're going to say, but this is the real story.
No doubt.
No doubt. Okay, and I'm getting old, so I have to put on my glasses. So at the end is John Hagmeyer. John is the co-founder of Interactive Achievement. IA was sold to Power School. IA has developed the award-winning on-track platform for teachers and administrators to assess and improve student performance. Prior to creating Interactive Achievement, Jonathan worked for over 60 years in public education as a teacher and principal, where he saw firsthand the need for teachers to have tools to help students stay on track to support individualized instruction. So he sold off his company. At that point, he now has started a new company called, where's it at in here, Commonwealth Growth Group, and so he's a venture capital person. He has a BA in history. I guess that might be a theme also for this, because we actually have at least 3 people who are from the humanities backgrounds. And so he has a BA in history/government and a master's degree in educational leadership. Next on our group is Brian. Brian Morgan is founder and CEO of Venture Life and the venture travel company. I have the cold that I think has been going around Missoula, certainly around the university, as do a couple of the panelists, so some of us may sound funny, but the venture travel company with trips worldwide. He founded the company in 1999 with little more than a cell phone and a laptop. Since then, his company has grown to serve more than 3,500 travelers each year with 23 full-time staff in Missoula. Less than 1% of customers are from Montana. Venture Life has been nationally recognized for its outstanding itineraries in such places as the New York Times, USA Today, National Geographic Traveler, and more. Outside Magazine has repeatedly listed Venture Life as one of the best places to work in the U.S. Next is Angie. Angie DeYoung is currently the International Trade Manager for the Montana Department of Commerce's Export Montana program. Since 2014, Angeline and the Export Montana team have worked with hundreds of exporters throughout the state of Montana to help them begin exporting or to expand their international markets, as well as successfully securing more than $1 million in federal grants for supporting Montana exporters. She formerly worked for the Montana Department of Agriculture for 14 years, helping to develop and market Montana's agricultural businesses. Next is Michael. Michael Fitzgerald is the CEO of Submittable, a company he founded with Bruce Timmonsey and John Brownwell in 2010. The company has over 4,000 clients in 46 countries, including CBS, Condé Nast, Warner Brothers, Chicago Tribune, Harlequin, Harvard, MIT, and over 500 other institutions of higher education, including recently the University of Montana, for the graduate school there. He lives in Missoula with his wife and 2 sons. And last is Brigida. Brigida is the World Trade Center Executive Director. She joined the Montana World Trade Center in the fall of 2014. Since that time, the Montana World Trade Center has assisted roughly 70 businesses a year in international endeavors, coordinated successful outbound and inbound trade events, and engaged dozens of students in the service of Montana businesses. Prior to her current position, she served as the Director of Business Development for the Missoula Economic Partnership. She has also worked in international sales and marketing for Winter International. She holds undergraduate degrees in international affairs and Spanish Latin American area studies from the American University in Washington, D.C. Much more importantly, thank you for the plug, an MBA from the University of Montana, a really great university. So our theme is thinking big, helping go international, and we really want this to be interactive. So I think you're going to tell us sort of maybe a nugget of some kind, or what they want you to sort of get from thinking about going either out of state or internationally. And then, but please ask questions. We want this to be answer as many questions as you have. So let's start with John. Tell us a nugget or story or something you want to get across to me.
Nugget or story? I would say I'm out of stories. After yesterday, my wife would say you're lying. So, you know, I would say I probably lost about $1 million trying to get outside of Virginia. We dominated the Virginia market, just dominated it. In fact, at the end, we had 98% of the market with a 100% retention of our clients, never lost them. And so Virginia itself, just to give you a really quick, when I kept saying you have to keep going all in, we actually had a meeting on laying off 50% of our employees and just owning the Virginia market. So we were 50% more in employees than we needed to because we were going to grow outside of Virginia. We wanted to support it. Nothing burns cash more than growth. Nothing. Right? You could be losing money, but in a sense of from a revenue perspective, but you know you are, and you can let people go. And it's when you're growing, you don't know how many to hire, so you're hiring. And so just a quick, we couldn't get outside of Virginia, and to crack that code was so much harder than I thought it would. Not just to go, we also went international. We were talking, Virginia really helped us go international later on. But just getting outside of Virginia, because once we had the market, there was no growth. There was no more growth. This is it. They're not going to build more school districts in the state of Virginia. That's not going to happen. And so there are 49 other states. And then you start thinking international. So what it took for me, I'll just let you guys know, is it took expertise. Not only expertise in the investors we took on, but it took the expertise in the people I hired. So when I talked about those golden years, I didn't tell you how we hired them. So I'll tell you, we were doing $4 million in recurring revenue at the time. And I only would interview and hire people that had done it. So like Marcy Daniel, my COO, she was with a company that started at $3 million in revenue, and she took it to $30 million. She was part of that. Tom Haas, my CFO, was with a company that was at $6 million, took it to $60 million. So I wanted somebody that had done it, had experience. Tom, they were in 13 different countries. And those of you who are in different countries now understand what I mean by tax laws, the laws to get procurement in those countries. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. So to have that expertise that have lived it, and here's another thing, wisdom only comes with time and experience, people. You know, I had a 25-year-old who was pitching his business to me, tell me how much wisdom, literally said how much wisdom he had. I could just feel my father coming over and smacking this kid in the head, you know. So it is. I loved Kierkegaard. I got to read Kierkegaard, and he was right when he talked about Abraham and the wisdom Abraham had and the faith he had was so deep because he was 100 when he had his son up there when he was going to sacrifice his son, of which God was going to give him back that son. Not another son, that one. Because that's what he believed. I mean, and so it takes so much time, and to have that kind of wisdom. I didn't realize how great we were, right? We had 98%. Come on, everybody would say to me, nobody ever gets a market like that. You're awesome, but we could not get out, and it took me to go out and find people who had wisdom, and who had the knowledge and who had done it. So there's my little nugget of that is just continuously know you don't know, realize you are a C student in something, you know. As my daughter got us, man, I watch parents get upset with kids who get B's today. I see it all the time. Man, I give my daughter the biggest hug. She would get mad at me because she wanted an A and everything. And I'm like, you've doubled my GPA. We have to go for a DNA test. You know, we got to make sure, you know. I mean that in the world today, it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to continuously fail at the same thing over and over again. So learn how to, I don't know, go find, where do I find that answer? That's mine.
Yeah, I'll pretend like I'm the moderator. I heard two pieces of useful information in there, and one is the collective intelligence that I know both Angie and Brigida bring this conversation, because I've been to some of the events that Brigida's put on. There is a group of people within Missoula that understand how to do international overseas kinds of business ventures. And so I would say get connected to that group if you plan on going that direction, which you should, and because they do have that wisdom and expertise from a lot of people's failures, I guess, to sort of tell us the right thing to do. And the other thing I heard in there was managing your growth. I think we've seen it certainly in one local company, and I think there are probably others in which the expectation for when you make that big step from being just a really small couple-person company to think you're going to be a really large company and you get the venture capital money coming in, if you don't manage the expenditures out of that venture capital funds, you can easily overspend those dollars and find yourself in financial difficulty. So there's some message there as well. So Brian, give us a nugget of some kind.
Okay.
Brian is not the company I'm referring to, by the way, so.
Thank you. Well, I think it's important to understand what Adventure Life does beyond the sort of razzle and dazzle of an expedition to Antarctica or trip to Machu Picchu. Essentially, what we export is the advice, consulting services, and coordination services of people here in Montana. So, in terms of what we're exporting and what we're selling, it's not so much the trip that's going somewhere else. I don't own any of the services upon arrival. What we're selling is our consulting services and our advising services. My first 3 months in business, I thought I would do the local market because I didn't know how to go beyond that. So I put up little flyers in a few different towns, coffee shops and things like that, and received no phone calls at all, and quickly retooled and jumped on to the internet. I was fortunate to ride the search engine wave, and so many of our customers come from search engine results, and we work really hard to do that. And we also have a really active PR campaign that they're responsible for getting us into that national media spotlight. So it's really been the combination of, first of all, identifying that this was not my market, that Montana was too small, and then figuring out the easiest way to get there. And at the time, it was the growth of search engines, and then maintaining that and expanding a little bit into some PR things. But I think for me, I think that's one of the things we can Missoula has a real opportunity for, is we're always talking about what amazing people we have here, what amazing resources we have with a highly educated workforce. So any organization that's exporting information services, advising services, I think we have a real competitive advantage here in Missoula in particular.
Just a really quick nugget on the side.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm sitting on a panel yesterday, if you want to think about outside of Montana and wherever, so 8 years ago, Brian planned our kids' honeymoon. My wife hired them 8 years ago, online, got them online, down to Costa Rica or wherever we said. I don't know.
Yeah,
wherever
your
my
wife said
said.
the
Yeah,
Amazon.
forget the Amazon.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, it was, I guess. I didn't get to go. But,
It wasn't exciting
But
except for everybody at the
and then my
computer.
wife pulled up her socks, and they were socks she had bought from Michelle online. Her compression socks. When we fly, she had bought those socks, and she said, "Isn't that an amazing thing that people trying to get globalization and in your mind?" They brought us in to speak, and two of the speakers we had already purchased something from them.
You're going to have to ask your dentist if she's
Oh, we're getting her. Yeah, Linda, then we're done. I've got the trifecta, and we are cranking. Let's go. Let's go. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. I thought that was pretty cool.
Please jump in, and then if you have questions or comments from the audience, please do so. The other thing that I heard in Brian's thing is that Montana's small. One of the taglines I've been pitching at the university is you can travel great distances in Montana. It's a large state, but it's actually very small, particularly Missoula is very small, very entrepreneurial community. It was interesting coming from New Orleans to come here. New Orleans, I had to beg people to start companies. I had to really work hard to build an entrepreneurial spirit here. I came here and everybody you meet is starting up a company or a nonprofit here in Missoula. We don't have enough people to support all those entrepreneurial activities, and therefore it's small, it really is small. But we're creating a lot of companies, a lot of things here, so you've got to really have to think outside of Missoula and even outside of the state. So, Angie, tell us what your nuggets are.
I guess my job today is to, if you haven't thought about this already, that not only can you export, but you should. You should start thinking about that now. 95% of the world's consumers are outside of the United States. 80% of the world's consumer buying power is outside the United States. So if you're not thinking more than outside Missoula, outside Montana, you're missing a large portion of the consumer population that can buy your products. The other thing I would like to point out is that when you're only thinking about selling your products within Montana, there's a likelihood that all you're doing is taking sales away from another Montana company, so we don't have that net Montana sales growth. So let's steal those sales from Utah and Idaho and Wyoming. Let's steal the sales from them. But that aside, exporting is a lot easier today than it was 20 years ago with all of the internet connectivity. There's a lot of things that you can do right from your very own desk. You can plan a trip to the Amazon. Our program in the Montana Department of Commerce, our international program, has grant funds available. I'm still working on Linda to get you to take advantage of them. But we have grant funds available that can help manage the risk of trying out the export markets and doing it for the first time by yourself. And we also partner regularly with the World Trade Center to offer some technical assistance. Our grant program can help pay for exhibiting at trade shows, getting your marketing materials, your website, your brochures, everything translated into foreign languages, and it can also help you take advantage of the federal export technical assistance programs, which can help you set up one-on-one meetings with whatever type of client you're looking for in those countries. And so that's what I wanted to make sure you know, is that you can and you should, and that we're here to help.
Okay, so what I heard there was money.
That's not all we are. But
Okay.
There's free money.
Yeah,
Free
free
money.
money. I heard
Call
money
now.
out of there. So take down her contact information. Michael, give us a nugget.
Yeah, sir.
This might be interesting. I was at a meeting not too long ago that Brigida put together, and it seemed like there was some tension there because I think Brigida had one piece of advice for international work, and I think Michael at the end says, "Nah, don't listen to any of that stuff. Here's how I did it." So maybe that's what our nugget's going to be. Let's see.
I have a thing with lawyers.
I'm not a lawyer.
I know you're not. Cage match after. Myself and my two partners started Smittable in 2000. We sort of loosely 2008, 2009. We all had day jobs. I was actually working for Bob, and when the company sort of slowly came together over the course of a year, Bruce and I were building our first version of the product on nights and weekends, and the big leap was when we all quit our jobs, which in retrospect was insane. Like we thought we'd release the product on Monday and be counting money. Our biggest problem would be counting money. How do we count all the money by Friday? And and we didn't make our first $1. And it was literally $1 for another 5 months. So, but one of the things, all three of us were developers, and one of the things that, one of the sort of loose tenets of the company was we never wanted to do an RFP again in our lives. Does everyone know what an RFP is?
Yes.
So that's like, an RFP is a client putting the vendor on the defense and asking them to do a bunch of work often without pay from the get-go. It's just like an awful arrangement. So how do you do that? one, you got to have a product that basically is the answer to any RFP that you might be in that market. So you got to productize instead of creating a service. So how do you build a business that sells a product instead of billable hours? And it might seem really straightforward, but it's actually, it's hard. Like productizing, we sell software, but you know, everyone's got a list of requirements that they want. The bigger the organization, the more input they get, the more sort of fluff that they need put into the product. So how do you sell them exactly what they want but without changing what you've built? And so very early on, we were focused on just building a product that we could sell for a single price. And at the time, it was $10 a month. So this was sort of 2010. SaaS existed, but it was an early cloud-based SaaS platform that people would pay us $10 a month for. And we also did focus, like Brian, we immediately focused on out-of-state customers because our original product was for publishers. So we were buying ads. We would buy the names of editors for ads, names of editors in New York City who we wanted to buy our product, so when they Google themselves, they'd get pitched an ad for our software. But our very first client, the first person to put in their credit card and pay us, was this kid in his basement in Baltimore who was making a zine. And how do you target that, right? Like that was, but what we did was I like called him up. It was like 2 in the morning, and John, we all worked out of our homes at the time. So we're like IMing, like, oh my God, someone just put the credit card, like we're freaking out, like. And the next morning, I called him. I was like, you know, who are you? Why'd you do this? You know, it just happened that we grew up about 10 miles from each other, so we connected there. But then he just sort of gave me all this organic language of what he was trying to do, which at that time he was trying to crowdsource articles about. This particular kid was crowdsourcing articles about skateboarding. So he wanted a way for an inbox of skateboarding articles for a bunch of his friends to look at. And that doesn't seem like a market, right? Like how many kids in their basement or how big, and if they're paying you $10 a month, you need $1 million of them to make any money. So, but that gave us a lot of language for the site. I immediately took the things he was saying and put it back into the ads, put it back into the site, and then slowly other weirdos from their basements all over the world. The second person who bought was a small press in Scotland. So our second customer was international. And the third person who bought, they're not a customer anymore, but it was Nerve magazine. So we, like, it was, you know, I mean, it could have been luck, but it also, I mean, it was definitely a lot of luck. But that immediately told me that I've just got this massive potential market, because I've got like a commercial magazine in New York, a small book publisher in Scotland, and a kid making a zine in Baltimore. And that let me be irrational for like 4 years. And that was, I mean, the things I would do, I would productize, I would ignore your local market. Because one, your local market is also going to create false relationships. Like if I sell to the U, I'm an alumni, I have kids, like the whole relationship's already like tainted a little bit. Like I want people who actually are out there looking for my software and to solve their problem. So we don't, there's nothing like weird about like why they're buying it, right? So I went out of my way to ignore the U. I tried to ignore most of Montana, and we focused exclusively on selling to out-of-state from day one, and it really served us well. Some of the ways that we did that was content marketing. So I know that's sort of a big buzzword, but early on we didn't know any, I mean, I was an English major and I have a graduate degree in creative writing. So I don't know anything about business, none of my partners do. But what I did know how to do was write. So I would just write, I would just think of like what was a potentially divisive blog post, and I would like think really long and hard about why Amazon was going to fail, and I would write a blog post about it, and then it would get shared through New York. Like, you know, like people don't know you're just a kid or a guy on his couch in Montana. So content marketing was incredibly valuable. Make sure that it's something people can engage in. Don't write it about yourself, write it about your industry. write about your customers, like give information that your customers actually can go and use. We published a blog last week. It was called 19 Ways to Market Your Book. And essentially, and so it's focused on writers and publishers. And we don't help people market their books. It's just those end up being our customers. And that thing is, it's like, it was shared on Hacker News, it was shared on Facebook. I mean, it was shared on Facebook over 200 times. It was shared on BuzzFeed. And so if you write really engaging content, not about we don't mention ourselves once in the blog post. We just want to, everything's got to be informative, engaging. That's really it. Everything's got to either like give information or be engaging. It's not about promotion, and people will naturally like pull your name into the conversation. Targeting blogs, so sharing, every blog like starts out pretty hot and heavy, and like 6 months in, they get a following, they're experts in some weird little thing, like they're experts in tomatoes. But after month 6, they've run out of all their juice. They don't actually have anything else to write. So they're all looking for content. So if you have something that you've written and there's somebody who's got a bigger audience than you, just reach out to that blog and say like, hey, I wrote this, would you be interested? And at the bottom, there's a link back to you. Those have been very valuable for us. Google Ads, like this can be a rabbit hole. It's an easy way to spend a lot of money really quickly. It's also incredibly powerful. You know, like you can watch in real time if that editor in New York clicks on her name, you know. But it's also become saturated. If you're in a market that has any competition at all, your ads are going to be like $14 a click, or I don't know, Brian, what you pay, but
8, 9, 10 sometimes.
It's a lot. It's a lot. You have to have money to do it. I look for newer channels. We try to do one new channel a month. So a new channel is like some sort of social network that isn't Facebook or isn't, you know, we also do social Facebook ads, which, so Google can let you target based on keywords, primarily things they're searching. Facebook and LinkedIn can let you target based on interest because these people have all self-identified. But look for newer channels that haven't blown up yet, like Quora. If you like come across any place where your people hang out, if it's the nichier it is, the cheaper it is, and often the more effective it is. Let's see, trade shows. Trade shows are really a crapshoot because like we often get invited to trade shows where all the other software startups are there. Software startups aren't my customer. I don't know why I would spend $5 grand to go hang out with my competition.
10 by the time you're done.
Totally, right. So I look for trade shows that like don't expect us to be there. So you know, like if you go to a bass fishing trade show and you're a software company, you will stick out. One of the first things we did, which wasn't my idea, but Elke from Mama Load said, I'm going to this thing called Blogger. It's in it was down in San Jose. It's like 300 women bloggers, and you should come. I was like, well, I'm not a woman, I'm not a blogger. And I don't have any money. And she's like, no, you know, I don't know if you probably all know about Elke. She was very enthusiastic and was convincing, so I went. And because I was one of 3 dudes in the building, and I was one of 3 people, I was the only person who wasn't a blogger. I actually had software. Everyone knew what I did and knew about our product within 10 minutes. So it was super valuable. So go to like, you know, if you're a software company, go to the bass fishing trade shows. Like everyone will know what you did. And there's definitely more potential customers than going to a trade show full of startups where they all are broke and after your throat. So yeah, that's it. Productize versus service. Figure out a way never to do an RFP again.
Yeah, because they suck.
I also cold calling. I'm not a natural salesperson. You have to become one. And in the very beginning, I was desperate. We were looking at being very, very financially screwed every week for about 2 years. So I would send out 100 emails a day, but just write personal emails. I wasn't using HubSpot. I wasn't using any sort of CRM. I was using an Excel sheet, and I was writing personal emails. Everyone I thought could potentially use it, and I would follow up with 10 cold calls, which, I mean, some people, I mean, I've got salespeople now, and I can't get them off the phone. They're amazing, but personally, it was a very very challenging thing for me to do, and but it also steeled me against like the future. Like if you can cold call strangers, like you can do anything.
Absolutely.
I'd like to follow up on a couple things that Michael said that I heard there is one is looking for alternative ways to get out to your customer base. I mean, I got on search engines early on, but now getting onto the top page of search engine results in a competitive industry is nearly impossible. So you need to look for new ways of reaching out to your customer base, your potential customer base. So I heard that from you, and we do the same thing. We don't do AdWords, for example, anymore. We used to spend mid six figures a year on AdWord campaigns, and determined it was not worthwhile, that we could spend our money elsewhere. We do some remarketing ads now.
Yeah, that's actually been very successful.
The remarketing ad's been very successful, but we do the tradition. In other words, the traditional, like if you're doing SEO work or you're going to go out and do Google AdWords, if you're in a saturated area, that may not be the best place to go to reach out to, especially if you don't have a lot of money. But reaching out to new platforms in alternative ways is really, I think, that's how you get on that next wave that lets you really reach out. And then in terms of trade shows, I can't agree more. I mean, we used to do trade shows as well, and we're big about tracking where our customers come from. We've spent tons and tons of money to track those things, and years ago, when we were spending $10,000 a pop to go to trade shows in New York City and Chicago and places like this, we decided we were not going to hand out any more brochures, because we'd bring hundreds of brochures and give them out. We'd see people walking around with like stacks and stuff, and so we said we're only going to take names and then we'll send you something, and we did that. And a year and a half later, we found that we had booked one person out of like 3 trade shows or something like this. And so we were like, well, that's great. Now we know that this doesn't work.
Right.
And we're done with it.
That is, I think, another takeaway is measure.
Mm-hmm.
You all need to learn how to measure, and don't lie to yourselves. And I say that in this way. We went to trade shows, and I think we got negative 8 customers. I think we lost 8 customers.
Right.
But when I brought in those top-level people, we kicked ass in trade shows. And what I mean by that is, I'm talking, my COO, who was also the VP of marketing, before we walked into a trade show, there are already 74 meetings set up before we walked into there. Right? Mm-hmm. They had been touched 7 times by our company. Our salespeople didn't know what hit them when I brought Marcy in. They just didn't know what hit them, because she was like, no, you're just not going to go stand there, and you're going to go, and here's your meetings. We're setting them up. All you guys got to do is, she would say, you just do what God gifted you to do. Sit and talk to him, close the deal. That's your job. We're going to get you all ready for that, but you have to measure these things, because you don't want to, I'll say this, you don't want to do what Brian did or what I did, spend 3 years of throwing away money. I'm sure Michael can go through, he said all the things that they were doing wrong, how much time it took them to figure out, wait a minute, this is a complete waste of our time, because we just didn't. And now you can, from a technology standpoint, there are so many easy ways to do that, and it's worth the spend, because it just saves you so much money in that sense. So I think it was a big nugget too from what Michael is, just learn how to measure honestly and without emotion. Is this working or is it not? And the only way it's working is it producing revenue? In the end, is that producing revenue? If not, then no, that's not a good thing. I don't care if it's a kumbaya moment, it doesn't matter. It's not producing revenue.
And so what I heard 2 things in there. One, you can save time for Cheetah. One is, I see a lot of business plans, and almost none of them have in the cost of customer acquisition, so you have to be able to get that number and plan for it. Another thing I heard is to make sure you have enough money up front to get through that lean period at the beginning, because that's where most businesses die, is because they sort of overestimate how much they're going to do in sales or how well the product can be done, and therefore they don't have enough money when they first start, and so they get the lean period, and they usually mortgage their house and all sorts of other stuff. Regina, please tell us your nugget.
So how many of you in the audience own your own business or aspire to do so? Great. And how many of you have dedicated international departments? No? Well, you're not alone because, in a state like Montana that has the highest level of entrepreneurship in the nation per capita, paying attention, John, most of those businesses are SMEs or even micro businesses, so they don't have the bandwidth to have dedicated international departments. And truthfully, there are probably only a handful of companies in the state that do. So I make that point because, of course, my organization is in the business of assisting companies like yours. And when we work with our clients, we work with them as sort of that on-call resource that's dedicated specifically to international endeavors. And you're gonna need that kind of help if you fit the profile of most of the businesses in the state of Montana. So that's what we do in the Trade Center, and I'm happy to go into granular detail about all the different ways we do that, from customized assistance to trade missions, et cetera, but I'm not gonna do a big commercial today because I wanna stick with the theme here. So going to the topic of thinking bigger, I did pull up a statistic on this. So more than 304,000 US companies exported goods in 2014. That's still the most recent data till next month. Of those companies, 98% were small and medium-sized companies, okay? And I think that's just something very important for you all to recognize. We heard Angie talking about exporting from start. We heard Michael talking about his second client was in Scotland. So that holds true not just for Michael, but it holds true for many other companies. And that historical path that most businesses had to take, where they had to be in business for a long time and reach a certain level of maturity before they would ever consider selling internationally, it just doesn't hold true anymore. Yesterday we talked, or Michelle with Vim and Vigor was on the panel in addition to Brian. Michelle's business was international right out of the gate, not only in what she's selling, but how she's sourcing. At the Trade Center, we work with companies from all different industries and companies of all different sizes to help them sell their products or services to a global audience, because the internet showcases your firm to a global audience whether you intend to do that or not. So you better be ready for it. So my advice to you is, yes, of course, think big, but plan for bite-sized chunks of mitigated risk to help you get there, right? And certainly if you'd like some help in developing what those bite-sized chunks are, we're an organization that can help you do that. And I think that what this panel is revealing too are there are a lot of other resources, whether they're public sector resources like Angie, but there are private sector resources that you can talk to, other entrepreneurs that you can talk to about, hey, how have you handled this in that particular situation? And in fact, at the Trade Center, I find we do a lot of connecting business to business, with companies that are competing or collaborating, they can collaborate on something and not competing, right? So call on those resources. A couple other things came up in these comments that I think are important to talk about. You heard Scott reference a tension between me and Michael at the last thing. You know what? Michael tells it to me straight no matter what, and it has been that way from the very beginning, and I tell it to Michael straight too, and you can't shy away from that. If anything, and you hear this in every single entrepreneurial session that you go to, but we mean it. Embrace it. Find those people that are going to tell it to you straight. You do not want the sugar-coated version of reality. You have got to have those people in your life, and embrace them with the, as you would your favorite customers, because they're going to help you figure out not only what those challenges are or those things those potentially critical flaws that you didn't see in your business. They're going to also help you figure out how to surmount those obstacles. Okay, so that's one thing. And then the other thing, we talked at the panel thinking big, and thinking big isn't the same as perfectly, flawlessly executing a grand plan. That doesn't happen, ever. So, don't be so hard on yourself as you have these little failures along the way. Again, embrace them as learning opportunities. plan for those bite-sized chunks of mitigated risk that I talked about. And if you don't know what those chunks are, the size they should be, or the things that you should be looking out for, then call on people to help you figure it out. And stick with it. And Michael, hopefully the story will not offend you, and if it does, then you'll do something like sneeze on me right now. Would be. I remember when Michael, shortly after you started your business and we visited at MEP, you came in to see me, and it was very early stages, and you had a revenue stream at that point, but it wasn't very much from memory. And you were talking to me, and you just said, it stuck with me, you said, it just sucks so much sometimes. I mean, sometimes you just want to take your kids out for pizza. And it was hard for you, and you were sacrificing time, and there was very little money. I mean, you and your partners, John told yesterday, you were all in on this. And so know that you can also get past that. You may not. Not every story ends up as, Michael's has, but there are people in a support network in the community that can help you to navigate that territory. So those are things. Yeah.
Most don't, just so we all know that.
Yeah.
Everybody in the room and that, so 9.5 out of 10 businesses don't make it past 10 years. All right. We used to keep the stats on our phone, by the way, when we weren't eating. Literally, my best friend literally lived on ramen noodles, Turkish Silver cigarettes, and Mountain Dew. And I'm not making that up. He literally did that to survive, right? He was lucky because he wasn't married, didn't have kids. There were some factors. But man, it is just this whole notion that if this was so easy, or just and there's a big surge going across the country right now. Look at all the, I don't know about the University of Montana, but every university I'm speaking or at, there's an entrepreneurial program now to be an entrepreneur. I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. We're gonna make you an entrepreneur, and so I want everybody just to be cautious in the sense of everything from Michael and Brian and myself and Michelle and Linda. There's a lot of tragic stories out there, but you'll never know. You'll never know unless you go all in and you risk it. You won't know. You'll be a little safer, and that's okay. And that's okay too. I want that to be known. That's okay. It's okay to have a good job. This is what I want to do. This is what I like. That I would say that is the majority of people in the world. My wife, once again, I would tell you, she's the risk adverse person in the world. And we're going to talk about that, I think, at 10:30 or whatever. It was really, really hard because in my mind, I wasn't losing anything except for my pride and failure. In her mind, we were losing everything. We were going to be. We used to joke. She used to say to me, "If we're in a box," that's how she would open the line. And for a husband who truly loved her, I do, it was one of the most crushing statements you could have said to me, right? I mean, we all know what it's like. He said $1. Look at this guy was on the phone for $1. Stop it. I thought that was a great. I thought we were happy. We had our first was $5,000. It was actually the smallest check we could have gotten in our business was $5,000. And I remember hugging everybody on the porch because that's where the mailbox was. And everybody came over, and well, 3 of us, and we were hugging. And I said these words: "I don't have to borrow money this month." That's what it was. That's what it meant. And so I think from the nugget of, getting to where you are and I think thinking international and outside of Montana is key first, because you can always come back to Montana. You can. I mean, that's what I would tell you. And by then you're established, you have some lessons you've learned. But it seems to me, just from an outsider's perspective, there's a lot of wisdom and knowledge in your area. How do you do that? So, and I think they're willing to tell you or give you that advice. So if I would just say to you, and I'll be blunt, shame on you if you don't go out and seek it. Then take what you get, and don't complain about that. Because there's a lot of good people here. I see that in Montana. There's just, think about it. They have an organization that's set up in this state to help you get out of the country. I'm assuming that's all you do. What I mean by that is, that's what you do. This is your purpose. You wake up and you say, how can I help businesses sell across the world today? And you have no other purpose. That's your purpose. So I would tell you, from seeing up here a great nugget from I would say from me looking in, is there's a lot of support here. Just go out and find it, and I think the chamber's doing a good job putting stuff together for you. Trust me, I told Kim, the double Kims and Clint over there, you know, we had no, we're twice the size of you, and we don't have this. You know, we're doing a lot of it on our own and building stuff, different organizations, but from our chamber, we don't have this, so utilize it. Sorry.
So, audience participation, questions, comments?
I'd say something as a guy who was involved in that company.
I know.
enforcement.
And maybe that wasn't who I was referring to.
Well, it should have. I got out when I saw the spending was going high.
Yeah.
You know, and knowing what was coming. But I've been doing startups now for 30 years, and the first one was tragically bad. And, you know, you think it's the end of the world, and you lose your best friend, and you have all of these things. The problem is you're gonna have bud, and you're gonna go do it again. It's not the end of the world, and after a while, a couple, 3, 4, you just know how to do it, and you learn how to deal with the pressure of things going south, and you learn to get out. You know, I mean, that's the hard part about it, is at some point, you want to get out early rather than late on these things. I always go back to the farming community I grew up. We had a bunch of homesteaders up there. My family was doing pretty well. We just started accumulating all those little farms, and they always waited till the last freaking moment before they would have to sell out. There was nothing left. They could grow. They were gonna go broke, and now they had to sell to us. And don't do that. Get out and move on to the next one. Maybe not, I mean, you guys kind of went through the valley of death a couple times, it sounds like, John, but you can make it sometimes, but if there's 9 out of 10 that are failing, accept what that means. And this is not for the faint of heart, what you're all doing here.
That's a good point.
I got 2 questions, actually. I heard you talk about how there's a lot of resources around at the university and all over the community. Is there a list or, you know, some kind of reference you guys might have available for where all that stuff is? And the second question was just kind of related. Apparently there are also some organizations that have some financial resources available. So how do we want a list of them too?
Yeah, I think each one of I don't know if there's maybe this is a flaw of the city and or state. I don't know, and you may correct me on the state level, because I know that John Rogers was trying to set up something where it's a site you could find a lot of this information. For us, we're starting a new thing, you'll hear about it, as press release being written now, called Accelerate Montana. And so that's gonna be our branding for the entry point for all the resources the university provides. And so once that press release comes out, look up Accelerate Montana. They'll basically put you in contact with Joe Fungi, and then he will find the right person at the university to talk to.
When is that projected to show
The
up?
press release should go out in the next day or two.
Funny you should
But-
ask, launch event next Thursday, the 26th.
Yeah.
There's also a list.
Let me write that down.
Oh, it's on the back of the thing too?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, see, the chamber's on top of everything, so. Oh, yeah, Regina's on top of everything, so.
And there's also a graphic image that we have, I don't know if you were able to use that in anything, Kim, but this graphic image that kind of shows the programs, not only within the university system that serve businesses and sort of where in the spectrum they fit in, so serve startups all the way through, you know, trade centers selling internationally. And then it also has community resources and state resources. It delves into some funding stuff.
And this is Accelerate Montana, is that?
Yeah, let's exchange cards. I can give you a copy of that graphic, and you can come to Accelerate Montana's event next Thursday. I think it is the 26th.
One of the resources the chamber has is called Tools for Business Success. If you go to the chamber's website and go into Tools for Business Success, you'll see a list, for example, on funding that will include everything state, local, and regional in funding. There are resources listing all of the one-on-one help that you can get in the area, university contacts, training, how to deal with businesses. There are like 800 to 1,000 links. It's all free for local businesses, that's courtesy of the chamber.
Okay, I got it on my list.
That link is under the top page under resources, is where you can find that. And then if you just want to meet folks, we've got 820 businesses in the Missoula area that are part of the chamber. Our job is to help you do that. We're here to do that. Come see us. That's what we do for folks. There's some folks in this room that we've helped connect that can testify to that. So we're here to help. We just have to know what you're looking for. And then the part of failure, look for failure only through failure do you grow and understand what to do better next time. We talk about the great athletes in the world, their great accomplishments, but who was a leader in strikeouts for 50 years? Who was a leader in missed shots for 50 years? All these people learn from failure. And so take that as a good thing. In sales, you probably had people tell you, you want to get your 7 no's because then you've got 3 yeses coming. So don't be scared of failure. It's a positive thing if you look at it from the right angle.
Just hurts.
Yeah.
It does, but if you understand the pain you're getting is growth pain. That's what it is, it's growth pain.
That's what Gates wrote once. Nobody ever talks about it.
Yeah. Questions, comments, more stuff? Otherwise I'll tell.
You know, if there's
I'll
no,
tell my story.
I throw something out regarding some of the, if there's no more questions about selling internationally and nationally, and we're talking about startup and actually what it takes to start something. And I agree, when I started, there was no, I didn't even know the word entrepreneur. Now I put it down in my tax return as my profession. But so there has been this big focus across campuses and across everywhere you open with media about entrepreneurism, and they're trying to teach it, and we're having meetings about it and things like that. You know, first of all, the 3 of us on the panel here all do come from the humanities, and I think that's worth noting, because I know if we have some people from campus here, or just people that are are going to school, or going to have kids in school, the humanities are knocked all the time, and yet all 3 of us come from the humanities.
Absolutely.
But secondly, when I started my business, and it sounds a little bit like John had this experience and Michael had this experience, I had failed tactics. That's true, but failure was never an option for me, and I never thought I would fail, actually. I mean, and I don't want that to sound arrogant, because I didn't know, I guess in a way maybe I didn't know that I would succeed, but I never, it was just not part of my mindset. I knew I was gonna do, for me, I had this 3-year thing, because I had heard that most startups fail. Actually, the word startup wasn't in there. Most businesses fail
3 years,
in 3
5
years.
They have
Yeah.
1 year, 3 year, 5 year statistics there.
So for me, I said, well, I'm going to do nothing. I'm not going to think about whether I make, as long as I can eat, and I ate a ton of bruschetta pizza, and I never will eat another one again. For me, there was no option of, I wasn't thinking I would ever take money out. Except if I could just feed myself and put I lived in a basement apartment. Actually, I lived in an attic there were 5 people in a house. I lived in the attic. I could only stand up in the first 2 feet of it, and then the rest I had to duck under. So, but I knew that this was what I was going to do, and I wasn't going to give up because it got hard. I was going to not give up until maybe this 3-year period I had. And then when the 3 years hit, I thought I actually stopped that day and I knew I was going to take a breath that day. I picked an arbitrary birth date for the company, which I still use, and I was like, that was the day I was going to review whether I was going to continue with this or go get a different job. So I guess that's what I'm hearing here. I mean, Michael was ready. I mean, you were at the edge of.
But it was the same thing. I like to look at it as sort of building a moat around your business.
Yeah.
Everything that sucks, then whoever's going to come after you has to do that shitty thing.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, oh my God, that sucked. And I failed, and it cost $10,000. Someone's going to have to walk through that crap, man. Good, have at it. But it's behind me now.
Yeah.
So I can kind of keep going. So, I mean, I didn't think of stuff as failure. I thought of stuff as
Everybody I know that's ever started a company that was unconventional, and I'm not talking about conventional businesses, but unconventional businesses, has put in 60 and 70-hour work weeks and not flinched at it. And that was just part of what they did, whether there was money coming in or not. And so that is part of, I think, the process that you have to go through.
It's that resolve, is what I used to say. We just had resolve.
Mm-hmm.
And let me say this, that wasn't I guess it wasn't that I could build a product, or it wasn't that I had this ingenious marketing. I mean, I've seen a lot of my friends that, were really good at this, or learned, like Michael and Brian, who learned. Mine was I could get people to believe.
Mm-hmm.
I could get kids to believe when I was a teacher. I could get people to believe. That was my job, was to make sure we weren't quitting. I know this was hard. I know you just hand put in all of the classes for a district because we were down and they needed to test, and you just went to sleep at 5 a.m. I know that sucks, but wait a minute, great job. Kids are gonna test today, man. You know, and this is what you would do, and it's resolved. Well, here's what scares me. Are our kids gonna have that? Because we give them everything. My father gave me hard work. He did. He gave me honor. He taught me how to be unselfish, and he taught me how to be generous. That's what he gave me. And he didn't give me any money. They sent me cookies in college. Got 25 cents a cookie, by the way. If you go around the dorm rooms, you can make money on that. Right? But I worry about our kids today. As much as we care about them, we want to protect them, and we do that. And I am the biggest culprit in the world for my 18-year-old daughter. Trust me. My wife reminds me of that all the time. And she's right. But I want you guys to see, we're sitting up here talking about resolve. We're sitting up here talking about how we lived off of nothing. Could our kids do that? Or are we going to supplement them for the rest of their life? And is that going to help them get through a business? Because the day you stop, they have to continue growing that business. And here's the other thing. They're going to have a lot of people counting on them to do it. They'd have to feed their families because of it and that. So think that through. I think this business generation, I'm going to call it from 2000 to about 2012, if you start in that kind of a time period, who came out of that. You know, we owe something back to our society and our country, our kids, and what is the best way to go about this. And a lot of things our parents did, they were right. As much as we don't want to admit that, my father was right at 99% of the things he told me, because I'm still not willing to give the 1% back to him that he was right about. But they were right, and so let's think that through. And we sit up here and tell these stories, but then we act differently, a lot of us do, with our children, or these kids coming through. So just want to throw that out there.
So we're talking a lot about, you know, starting a new organization and all the hardships and all the sacrifices to achieve a certain level of success. A lot of these businesses don't do well. Now everybody's at a place there that things are going pretty good right now, but one of the things I've been reading about lately and we haven't talked about is innovation. How do you make your organization that's doing well today be successful next year, 3 years, 5 years? I was just kind of curious what approaches you guys take to maybe sustainable innovation.
I've twice gone through forced evolution of my business model. Once was back in around 2008 when we were crushed by the recession. We went from about 20 employees to 12, and that happened, you know, fortunately, naturally. I didn't have to fire anybody, but through natural attrition, we just didn't replace positions. And during that time, you know, we had to completely change the concept of who we were. We used to think of ourselves as selling tours, and I had to, you know, begin. It took many years to make this change, but I had to realize what we sold was advice, and we had to change the way what we offered. And get more nimble regarding that, because before it was like I sold this essentially a service product, and recognize that wasn't going to be good enough. And now we're, you know, I'm about a third of the way through about a $300,000 software upgrade in my company, where we're building a new platform to allow us to do even more customization, but also in more of that tailor-make, but also access some of the online platforms that have made travel more frictionless than it was when I started. And so nobody's done this. I've looked at like software, you know, packages that have done some of it, and we looked at that and said, well, it's only doing half of what we need. So maybe we should just build it. And Montana, I think, is particularly a DIY place. It's a do-it-yourselfer place. That's probably why, you know, the level of entrepreneurship is mostly probably in the micro businesses, I imagine, here, not in the small. I think small business is like 50 plus, so I'm a micro business. You know, but we're a very do-it-yourselfer place because we don't have any big, giant industry here. And for me, that's really characterized how my company has chosen to evolve. So rather than like say, well, we need to choose, buy an off-the-shelf thing, we've looked at what's the changes we needed to make, and we're like, oh, we're gonna build them ourselves.
I would answer that in two ways. One is horizontal growth and vertical acquisition. One of the companies that I started did color vision testing on the computers. This was back in the early 80s, and computer monitors had just gotten to the point where the representation of the color was good enough that you could duplicate the hard copy tests. But then, as you know, we grew from there, we started doing visual acuity, and so a lot of these machines that you look at when you do your driver's test, you lean your head against it and you read off a chart. A lot of states, that's our product. We sold off to somebody else. Then we did perimetry, and so that's what I call horizontal growth, when it's something that makes sense within your existing company to see what the other markets are, the other kinds of products for that. But the value of trade shows, we did all sorts of trade shows back in the old days, and they were much more popular then, I think, than they are now. But when you do trade shows, one thing to do is to look at the smaller companies that really have great ideas that you can purchase in some fashion. And so that's what I mean, like vertical acquisition, that you find out who you can buy that's got the great idea that probably doesn't know how great it is because they don't see the bigger picture. So that's how I would answer that
So,
question.
and I have another comment, and, you know, even organizations that are in the public sector are not immune from having to innovate. But what I would tell you is that pay attention to your customers continually, deeply. I mean, it's a process you go through when you're starting your business. You've got to understand what your customers want and need. But it's not just like you're kicking back and saying, all right, nailed it, done. Now I can just sit back and collect the money for the years to come. It is that intense relationship that you have to have with your customers to know what is important to them, what constitutes meaningful innovation for them. Because it could look like the greatest thing since sliced bread to you, but if they don't value it, so what? So, I mean, that's that continual process of knowing, you know, without a doubt, what your customers value.
Well,
Yeah.
hire innovators. Everybody thinks they're an innovator, and that's wrong. For me, it's ideation. That was my gift. I love ideation. I could do that all day. But when you start going, there's a little box now. If you go out and get, if you see, there's initiation, ideation, all this stuff. You need to hire innovators, and they need to be in front of the customer, and they need to listen to the customer, and they need to hear all those things, and they need to come back and think and go, you know what? We should be doing this. And you're going to be like, yeah, why haven't we ever thought of that? You need to hire people that can innovate. Not everybody can innovate. Just because you're a company doesn't make you an innovative. We're an innovative company. Then I would walk in and I would see you have talent in your office of people who can innovate. And that's just not something that's, I would tell you, learn. I don't think that's a learned skill. I mean, that would be like, to me, saying, hey, go be a great painter. Or this comes from the humanities of learning. I'll tell you what you learn from that is you're not gifted in everything, right? You're just not. Because they make you take every class. When you do the humanities, the liberal arts, you have to take every other class. You have to take a class in everything. And you realize, wow, I don't know anything. This is great. You know, but put the innovators in front of your clients. And look around your staff. Do you have innovators? And if not, you need to go out and search for them. Learn how to hire them. How do I interview for that person? And go find them and put them in front.
Do you believe that should be a necessary cost or a necessary new part of organizations? Just having innovation?
Yeah, for me, we were very lucky. Ours was the teacher I hired as the salesperson who became our chief product officer. And so he was constant. He was we didn't realize this at the beginning, but he was the one innovating in the beginning for us. And so within about 4 years, we put him in charge of all of that. I was the guy who literally turned it over and go, from this point on, you own the products. So the answer is, yeah, it is so important to pay for it. Without that, you're not going to grow. You're just not. Somebody's going to take you over. $1.3 billion went into education tech companies in 2014, and we got none of it. And we had to fight every one of those people. Talk about the moat. We had to go out and fight, and they all got new tanks and guns, and we were still shooting our 30-06s back here. That's just the way it was. So you daggum right. You're out there fighting a battle don't think it's not. It is a battle and strategic, and you have to have certain positions, and if you don't, you better go find them, or somebody will take you over like that. And it'll happen that fast, and you'll look back and go, what just happened?
Another thing I would suggest is perhaps think about going to the business plan competitions and some of those events. because that's where innovators are pitching ideas. And again, they might not see the full potential for it, you might see the potential for it, but it'll give you some ideas and give you those kinds of people that are innovative. It's a way to, many times, at least at the university, those are students, graduates, undergraduate students, and they're potentially looking for jobs, and therefore they might be somebody you could hire. So I would go to business plan competitions, it's another suggestion. Yeah.
For a lot of us who are starting up, I think we spend some amount of time second guessing ourselves and wondering if we're doing the right thing, and then we spin out in overthinking and worrying. And somebody yesterday brought up a question about fear, and so I'm wondering for you all, how strong of a force was that sort of pull of like, oh my God, is this right? How much was it a strong force to like pull your focus off track, or not? Like, were you able to just put that out of your mind and just like fully focus on work? And if it was a force pulling you off track, what did you do to kind of overcome it?
For me, it was her, my wife. Well, it was, for me, I was the one.
You throw her under the bus.
I was throwing her under the bus. That was a good comment. She's the one who pulled me back from focusing on the failing and saying, focus on the positive and get it done. You can do, we're going to do this, right? It's the language you use, you know? So the fear from us, absolutely we had the fear. We had constantly had the fear. All the way to a point where the state superintendent wrote a letter that said, or one of her staff wrote a letter that said, don't buy interactive achievement.
Oh, geez.
That was from the state, right? What are you gonna do then? You're like, what the heck just happened? It's over. I called her. I said, cancel our vacations, man. We're done. She's like, stop it. And I'm like, it's over. And so my point is, it doesn't, just because it happened in the first 6 months, didn't mean it didn't happen in the last 6 months too, you know? So I think you gotta have somebody that I would say for me, like I said, it was Mary who was part of it, but not in the everyday, who could really rationally look at me and go, stop it. It's not that, get focused, you know, get your team focused. You know, when you talk like this, you scare everybody. I mean, she would say stuff like that, you know, and I would think of, right? You have this voice going, yeah, I guess you're right. When I do that, you're right. So, you know, I would say somebody on your team or somebody, you know, I'd almost assign them, you're the there's somebody who's rational. I mean, I'm just saying, you know, most of us can get a little irrational. So I would have a rational person asking me. That's what happened with us. So,
Brian, Michael, any comments?
Yeah, so like doubt, I mean, today we have millions in revenue, tons of employees, do stuff even when I don't show up. And but in the very beginning, I don't know who told me this, but someone just said, you know, for about 3 or 4 years, you're just gonna have a bunch of crappy decisions to make. And you just have to make one. You got like 5 crappy choices. It really ultimately doesn't matter. You just gotta make one and do it and go. And that was super valuable. Like, okay, we're gonna sell the poets, or like whatever the choice is, just make it and go. So somehow, I mean, this seems really trivial, but just taking action versus pontificating or thinking. So in the beginning, I would always just make sure I was, you know, even when I was working for Bob, and before we were really going, I was trying to do 1 or 2 things a day, just like write an email, a sales email, or write a cold call script, or I had this friend who kind of helped us out in the beginning. And does anyone know Steve Saroff? He's a character, and he was instrumental. He was our first investor, and
He'll tell it to you straight.
Oh my
too.
God.
And I know.
But he, you know, we were starving, and he's like, I'm pretty interested in this, and he's like, are you free on Thursday? And I was like, okay. We had no money, no revenue, and here's this person offering a vague sum of money that was going to get us, and also he had successfully sold a company for millions of dollars, so it seemed he had some secret sauce that I wanted. So he picks me up, and I was working. He picked me up at lunch. I was working for Bob, and I had an hour off at lunch, and I needed the job with Bob. I was like terrified, you know. And he drives me out to Barnes and Noble's, and he's like, "So what's your, you know, who's your target?" And our original market was publishers, and he brought out a tape measure, and he's like, let's go over, like here's yoga. I was like, let me see, like, hold this. And he measured how big the yoga book stacks were. And I know he got this from somewhere, but at the time I didn't know this. It was very effective. And he's like, yoga, and he like Googles it. Like, yoga's a like $17 billion market, and it's 13 feet long in Barnes and Noble. So I was like, yeah. And he goes, let's go look at dogs. And he's like, dogs, and we measure dogs. And he's like, dogs are like a $74 billion market. They're only like 8 feet in Barnes and Noble's, meaning how big the book stacks were. And he's like, let's go look at writing and publishing. And there's just like this huge selection of like how to get published, where to like writers markets, and it was like 20 feet. So he's like, I'm guessing this is like a $150 billion market. So I'm pretty close to writing you a check. Where do you got to be at 1, And I was like, okay. And he'd drive me back to work, and I'd go back to work, but here's this person sort of dangling, and he's like, why don't we meet again next Tuesday? And I'm like, okay. I was like, but I gotta eat, I can't. And he's like, oh, we'll eat at my house. So I ride my bike up, and he lives like 2 miles up the rattlesnake, and I hadn't eaten, and I'd get there, and he'd be like, oh, I forgot to go to the store. Do you want a half an orange? And he purposefully basically keep me starving so that I'd be sort of out of sorts while he negotiated. And he knew exactly what he was doing. And if you meet him, he doesn't seem this on top of it, but he really is. And so, but he was like, so I think this is going to be a good idea. Really, or, like, you seem like, you're desperate enough to do this. And, but first I want you to, I wrote this script, and he wrote a cold call script to like the president of Southwest Airlines. And he's like, they have a magazine. I just took a flight, and they had a magazine in the front. I think they could use, originally we were trying to sell to publishers. We wanted to sell amazing. And I was able to track down the CEO's phone number. So here it is, and he'd dial it. And he's like, just sell them, try to sell them. This is before we had a product, before we had a company, and I had eaten a half an orange in the last and and I got his secretary, but I like said something. I said the company's name, and I said my name, and I said, could you have him call me back? And I said, we're saving time, and whatever like the first version of it was. And it's like, he wasn't giving me advice, he was forcing me to deal, right? Like, and that like, make a decision. It's all crappy decisions, you just got to make one and go. To action over pontificating. Like, I never would have called the CEO of Southwest Airlines on my own. But once I did, it didn't kill me, right? Like, and that was a very valuable lesson. No, we didn't ever sold to them, But as a result, I got this guy being like, okay, he's crazy enough. He wrote me a check, right? And that was a very valuable thing. And so, yeah, take action over doubt. Sorry.
Actually, the answer I would have, I guess you'd tell the difference between a humanities guy and a sciences guy. I would have said, make sure you got a year's worth of capital, watch your burn rate, because there's nothing like the fear of the unknown to really give you the fear. It's the unknown part that will scare you.
You don't even know what a burn rate is at that time. What is the truth? Yeah. Are we lighting money on fire or something? What's going on?
I always had to tell myself that at many points in my life, I had absolutely nothing. And then you're able to grow from nothing. So there's nothing wrong getting back to nothing at some point. You can grow from there as well. So, yeah. I'm worried that we're running out of time. Go ahead.
Are we? Okay. I was going to quickly offer, so for me, and I don't want this to sound trite, but every single time I feel fearful about something, in my plan for my organization or business, I really have to sit there and ask myself, what are the things I can control in this, and what are the things I cannot control in this? And then I immediately focus, because every day I do things to grow my business. How can I generate revenue? How can I enhance my value proposition? So I focus in on those things that I know are going to help me grow my business, and I just purposefully take myself out of that. I have this honest conversation, what can I control, what can I not control? Go make some money, or go try to make some money today. Make a couple cold calls, do something hard that you might have put off, but
Even,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
like today, most of my day is spent in meetings and like
Yeah.
reacting to employees.
Yeah.
And you feel pretty useless because you're not making anything. You're just like saying yes or no to stuff. But at the end of the day, like how I sort of feel balanced is I'll just like write a line of code,
Yeah.
or I'll just do like one thing that adds up, that will eventually add up. And I won't leave the office until I've like
Get
got
that one thing done. Yeah, same.
Well, we probably need to finish there because I think the next group's about to start coming in. Let's go ahead and thank the panelists, and I'm sure they're available for questions.